Hello everybody, welcome to another edition of This Month in Irish History. I'm Dan Murphy. With me is our senior editor of Blue and Gold Illustrated, Lou Somogyi. We're getting into the summer months here for 2014. Today's episode, we're going to go back 20 years to 1994, when the summer of 94, when Notre Dame joined the Big East Conference. Obviously kind of a similar theme to this year with the ACC, Lou, but what was it like 20 years ago, the first time they kind of stepped into that conference?
Well, the biggest thing about that was, if we're going to go into a conference, football still had to stay independent. But the problem was, so many of the other sports were really suffering at the time. The basketball program, in Digger Phelps's last year, they were 12-20, and then the first 3 years under John McLeod, they were about 14 games below 500. Very difficult time scheduling. Now, Dick Rosenthal, the athletic director at the time, still was pretty adamant that they thought they could survive independently, but I think when you look back at it retrospectively, the basketball program was really just drowning. What was attractive in the 70s, like the cross-country rivalry with UCLA. UCLA was saying, why the heck should we come out in the middle of the conference season and play? In the 70s it was great because you only had one game a week televised, Saturday, sometimes Sunday also. But when ESPN formed in '79 and these conferences like the Big East started forming, a lot of the recruiting foothold took away from Notre Dame's power base in the East. Plus, you look at Muffet McGraw's basketball program, they were playing first in the North Star Conference and then the Midwestern Collegiate Conference. They were putting together good records, but their level of competition was so low that it really wasn't benefiting them, and they felt that get into the Big East without needing to go on football, and all the other Olympic sports would rise.
I think obviously not the independent football status was probably a priority for them, but why else was the Big East decided to be the right fit at that time?
Well, it was really just like the ACC is now, almost 20 years later, institutionally the right fit. You had a lot of the teams like Boston College, Catholic school, or Georgetown was Jesuit, but Seton Hall. Notre Dame always had a good foothold in the East. That's where the Subway alumni developed in New York City, and also it seemed just like a good marriage as far as geographically, where Notre Dame has had always a good presence in the towns like Boston and New York, Pennsylvania, all those areas.
When the conferences were shifting in recent years, this kind of most recent episode, the Big Ten came up, ACC came up, I think even the Big 12 was flirted with for a minute for Notre Dame. Was the same kind of conversation going on when Notre Dame joined the Big East then? Were other conferences in play?
Sure, and you always think of Big Ten just because of location and provincial part, but there's no way in the world Notre Dame was ever going to be in the Big Ten minus football. And that was the meal ticket. So the Big East was willing to acquiesce that, okay, you can keep football independent, but the other sports, you have to be in here with us. Now, the ACC, yeah, okay, it's more of a partial package, 4 or 5 games a year. You play with us in football. Who knows, 10, 20 years from now, Notre Dame might be in a super conference there, which includes the ACC.
What was the greatest effect these past 20 years have had on Notre Dame athletics by being in the Big East rather than somewhere else or an independent?
Well, I think, some might argue that, Notre Dame men's basketball program still isn't what it used to be, and it's not, but having been through the Big East, they've built a good identity there. They were usually in the top 4 and 5 when it was the best conference in the country. A lot of things got upgraded there because it forced them to elevate their play. Just like the ACC now is going to force, like the baseball team, which I think started 4-20 in the ACC, right. It's going to force them to become better. And same with, you look at women's basketball now, 4 straight Final Fours, and that was a big result of being able to join the ACC and really upgrade its recruiting. Men's and women's tennis and the swimming programs, and I know most people don't really care about that aspect, but as the athletics director at Notre Dame, a big part of your responsibility is to look at all 26 of the varsity sports and see what is in your best interest. And like I said, with baseball, I think hopefully 5-6 years from now we'll be saying, wow, moving to the ACC really uplifted that program.
When Notre Dame did choose to join the ACC, it was met with a little bit of controversy. People were a little bit worried about them losing their independent status, or are they going to the right place, leaving the Midwest, that type of thing. Was there controversy, or how was it greeted by the fans when they joined the Big East?
I think it all comes back again to football. I think the opinion was that, hey, that's fine. The Big East seems to be now falling apart, and ACC is another good institutional fit there with teams such as Duke and Virginia, Boston College, and everything. And it also expands your geographic recruiting base to Florida and Georgia, with Georgia Tech being in there, Florida State, Miami. So I think it was a win-win situation. And then you had the best of the other world, which was, hey, you still have your football independence, you can still schedule teams out of conference, you can keep USC, and you can bring in Texas on the future schedules if you want. You play 4 or 5 games, but hey, so what? You usually play teams like Boston College, Pittsburgh anyway, and now you got Miami's, the Florida States, Georgia Tech's, presence around the southern regions too, which has always been important. You look even with the Shamrock Series, you want to go to places where you can have a presence, like last year at Texas, to help your recruiting. And when you have already the Eastern Corridor, and then you get into the Mid-Atlantic with the Carolinas, and then you even go down south with Florida State, Miami, and Georgia Tech, you have a presence there too.
It's going to wrap it up for the summer edition of This Month in Irish History. For Lou Somogyi, I'm Dan Murphy. Thanks for joining us.